How many times have you prayed? How many times have you whispered words full of hope, only to find yourself returning to the same old worries? In this video, you will not hear the same old teachings, nor will you be comforted with empty promises. Instead, you will enter a journey of awakening, where the sacred is no longer something you seek out there, but something you begin to recognize as alive within you. When words are no longer needed, you become the living prayer. This is not just a story. It is a space where you remember the true power that has always been yours. Not begging, but uniting. The world has taught you that when you lack something, you must plead to receive it. From a young age, you learned how to say please, to ask, to hope, to wait. And as you grew older, your way of praying wasn't so different from raising your hand in class, hoping someone would notice. But that is not prayer. That is the reflection of a false belief that you are distant from what you desire and must persuade a higher power to grant it. The truth is the complete opposite. What you need is not out there. It has always been here. And prayer is not a petition sent to the heavens, but a return to the state of union with what already belongs to you. True prayer does not come from lack. It arises from understanding that God is not far from you, not driven by emotions, not concerned with right or wrong, and does not need your weeping to be moved. God is not a character, but a living principle operating within you. And prayer is not about convincing this principle to change its mind. It is about aligning yourself so you can recognize that you and the divine life have never been separate. One who understands the mechanics of the soul does not pray like a beggar, but merges with truth. They no longer say, "Please heal me." They quietly declare with unwavering trust, "Life is within me, and I align with the healing that is already unfolding." This is not self-hypnosis, nor delusion. This is affirmation born from clarity. When you know that what you need already exists on a higher frequency, you do not need to scream for it to happen. You only need to match it. Just like someone walking into a room and turning on a light, they do not beg the electricity. They simply connect to the right switch, and the electricity, which was always ready, responds without discriminating who flipped it. Prayer is the same. It does not depend on tone, words, or rituals. It depends on conscious connection to the spiritual law that operates in silence. Many believe that if they suffer enough, if they cry hard enough, a miracle will happen. But suffering does not change the law. It only lowers your vibration. The law is without emotion, yet it responds faithfully to the frequency you emit. One who knows how to truly pray does not speak much about the problem. They understand that dwelling on the problem only keeps it alive, and they do not suppress fear. They simply face it and say, "I choose to connect with what is greater than this emotion." That is prayer from an awakened soul. No begging, no demanding, only union. Like a drop of water melting into the ocean, no longer asking if it's allowed to exist, because it is already an inseparable part. Reflect on the moments you truly felt peace. Not when you were shouting, but when you surrendered. When you sat alone, no longer trying to control, and exhaled a long breath. In that moment, you were closer to real prayer. Nothing to prove, nothing to ask for, nothing to fear. Only one truth remains. You have returned to what you truly are. Union does not happen in noise. It happens in inner silence. When you stop listing what you lack and begin living as if you already possess it in spirit, the universe begins to rearrange appearances to match your new vibration. Prayer is not the act of creating something from nothing. It is the unveiling of what already exists, but you have not yet seen. When you adjust your mind to see through the eyes of the soul, you will witness it unfolding in every moment. Someone who has never studied any philosophy, but knows how to be still and grateful, will pray more effectively than one who has memorized thousands of scriptures but carries a heart full of doubt. Because prayer is not recitation, it is right living. You do not need to kneel to be heard. You only need to turn inward and know that you have already been heard the moment you became still. Union is when you no longer ask, "When will it happen?" but say, "I know it is already forming." Union is when you stop saying, "I have nothing," and begin to breathe with awareness. I am living in a world that is already abundant. Union is when you stop thinking God is somewhere far away and begin to realize there is something deeply quiet within whispering, "I have always been here." The world taught you how to beg, but the soul teaches you how to align. And true prayer only begins when you stop begging and start living as if it is already true. Not because you are daydreaming, but because you have finally remembered. And that is the beginning of union. Thoughts infused with emotion are the raw materials of creation. Have you ever noticed that some things you think about endlessly never come to pass, while others seem to materialize the moment they cross your mind? So, what makes the difference? It surely isn't the number of times you think them, but what you send along with the thought. Emotion. The universe does not respond to drifting ideas. It does not listen to hollow words, nor does it record shallow wishes. The universe answers only to real vibrations, to thoughts wrapped in feeling. A thought clothed in emotion becomes a command with weight. It is no longer a mere concept. It becomes a seed in the act of sprouting. And if you can maintain that frequency, what you think of no longer remains a wish, but becomes the first structure of reality. A person may repeat the words, "I am loved 1,000 times each day," but if their heart is filled with the fear of abandonment, then each repetition only sends out the frequency of lack, not love. It is not the words that determine truth, but the emotion behind them. You can say, "I am at peace," but if your mind is lost in chaos and you are merely forcing yourself to believe it, then those words have no legs to walk. An affirmation that has no root in genuine feeling is like foam on water. It floats briefly, dissolves quickly, and leaves no trace. But when you say something and you feel it as if it is already real, you have sent out a clear signal, a precise directive for the universal law to begin reorganizing everything around you to match what you are aligning with. So pause for a moment. I want to ask you something. You don't need to say it out loud. Just listen inwardly. How many times have you asked why prayer yields no result? Even when you say the right things, repeat positive affirmations, try to believe, and yet what you need never arrives. The answer does not lie in not doing enough, but in how you have felt it. Did you truly feel as if it were already real? Or were you still waiting for something to happen before allowing yourself to feel? The problem is that most people wait for positive emotions to arrive after the event. They say, "When I have money, I will feel free. When I am healthy, I will feel grateful. When I am loved, I will feel worthy." But the law of consciousness does not work that way. It runs in reverse. Feeling comes first, form follows. You must feel as if it has already happened for reality to have a chance to catch up to your emotion. That is why those who understand the law sit down every morning, not to wait for good news, but to actively generate a positive frequency first, as a creative act to start the day. They don't wait for peace to arrive to breathe calmly. They breathe calmly so that peace may be born. And they don't wait for the wish to be fulfilled before they give thanks. They give thanks beforehand, as if they have already received. That state of gratitude is the fusion of thought and emotion. It is the first material for anything that longs to become real. A neutral thought is merely light without amplification. But when you place your heart into it, it becomes a laser capable of cutting through every limitation. Emotion is the electricity. Thought is the device. If you have an idea without emotion, you are flipping a light switch with no power source. And if you are full of emotion but lack a clear thought, you are a current with no direction. The miracle only happens when both become one. Imagine yourself standing on the stage of your life. You are the actor, the scriptwriter, the director, and the audience of your own play. Every thought you think is a line of dialogue. Every emotion you feel is the spotlight shining on your scene. And when you merge the two, you are not merely performing a role. You are rewriting your script in real time. I want you to know that everything you are hoping for, waiting for, silently dreaming of, already exists in a higher realm of energy. It is not that you lack it, it is that you are not yet in harmony with it. And to harmonize does not mean to learn something new, but to feel what you have always known but once doubted. You do not need to strain to believe. You only need to be still enough to sense that what is good is closer than you think. And if today, while listening to these words, you can for even one moment feel something deeply as if it were already true, then you have already altered your internal structure. And that shift, though small, will begin to radiate outward into every layer, every situation, every relationship, every step you take. I thank you for being present on this journey, not only because you have listened, but because in each moment you choose to pause and connect with your inner self. You are becoming a part of the quiet recreation of the universe. And that does not just change you, it changes everything around you in a way more powerful than any plea. Gratitude is the affirmation of having already received. Gratitude is not a polite gesture, nor is it a reaction after receiving a gift. In the spiritual realm, gratitude is the first sign of one who has touched truth. When someone gives thanks without any change in external conditions, it is not the language of courtesy, but the evidence that they are living from the place of having already received. The universe does not respond in the order of receiving first, then giving thanks. It always works the other way around. When you give thanks beforehand, you affirm that it already exists, and at that very moment, the law is activated. No miracle ever follows a cry of desperation, but silent shifts always begin after a deep and sincere thank you. The one who begs emits a signal of lack. The one who gives thanks radiates the frequency of fulfillment. When a person enters a room and says, "Thank you for the light," you can be sure they are no longer fumbling for the switch. They know the switch has already been flipped. They know the source is already present, and that knowing makes every following action different. Gratitude is a refined way of affirming something is already here, without needing to justify or explain. You cannot be grateful and doubtful at the same time. A true expression of thanks is the perfect union of faith, reception, and humility. It comes with no demands. It needs no confirmation. It simply is a state of being for one who understands how the law works. When Jesus stood before thousands of hungry people with only a few loaves of bread, he did not look at the quantity and worry. He did not hesitate or strategize. He lifted his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me." Then he distributed. He did not wait for more bread to appear before he gave thanks. He gave thanks first, as if everything was already provided. That is the essence of true prayer. Every time you give thanks in silence, you are shaking the foundation of reality. Every expression of gratitude is a clear signal sent to the law saying, "I have received, I trust, I agree." And because you agree, the law begins to move. Gratitude is permission. It is the frequency where everything you desire already exists. It is the key that opens doors you thought you had to knock on for a long time. The world teaches you to give thanks after receiving something, but the Spirit teaches you to give thanks as a creative act that makes the thing possible. Everything you desire already exists on a particular frequency. If you emit the signal of desire without aligning with the frequency of gratitude, it is like calling someone without a network connection. The message does not go through. The wish never takes shape. And you think no one is listening. In truth, you never sent it correctly. Gratitude is how you signal that you are ready to receive. It shows that you are no longer resisting, no longer demanding, no longer fighting what is coming. It is alignment. And when your mind aligns with truth, all outward appearances are merely delayed reflections. You do not need to control reality. You only need to shift within and give thanks as if you are already standing inside the dream you once held. Gratitude cannot be performed. It cannot be faked. If you are trying to act grateful just to receive faster, you are still using gratitude as a tool of manipulation. And the law does not respond to motives. It responds only to authentic states of mind. To give thanks, like one who has already received, you must stop looking at external evidence. You must train your inner eyes. You must grow still, refuse to analyze, and enter that inner place where no questions remain. In that place, you know, and when you know, you give thanks. Those who live in gratitude do not live as victims. They do not wait for life to change. They are the ones who quietly move within, and the outer world must eventually rearrange itself to reflect that internal architecture. Gratitude is the most refined act of a matured soul. It is not loud, not showy, but it creates results more lasting than any voice can speak. One who gives thanks in the midst of pain has mastered a higher frequency. One who gives thanks for the lesson in loss is no longer bound by circumstance. And one who gives thanks before anything visibly changes is already changing everything. Gratitude is not the end of the prayer journey. It is the beginning. And when you allow thankfulness to become the steady rhythm of your life, all the things you once struggled to attain will begin to flow in, gently, in perfect time, and with lasting effect. Not because you have done enough, but because you have finally become one who knows how to receive. And that is enough. Do not tell God about the problem. Speak to the problem about the truth. One of the most subtle mistakes people make every day is bringing their problems before God as if He has never seen them. You explain, you elaborate, you analyze, and you hope that somehow, if you are passionate enough, emotional enough, a miracle will happen. But prayer is not a report submitted to a divine entity waiting to hear your requests. You do not need to tell God where it hurts, what you lack, or how disappointed you are. Not because He doesn't care, but because He does not respond to information. He responds only to frequency. When you come into prayer focused on the problem, you are unconsciously feeding it. Your mind is framed by what is wrong, and thus you maintain that exact frequency in your energetic field. The only possible outcome is the continuation of what already is. Effective prayer does not come from analyzing the pain, but from rising above it and affirming what is greater. It is not pretending the problem does not exist. It is refusing to let it be the center of what is true. When you speak to a chaotic situation and say, "I know a higher order is at work," you are not denying the situation. You are placing it under the light of truth. And truth, when spoken with understanding and emotion, begins to influence the form that is playing out. You can stand in the middle of difficulty without being swept away by it if you know how to keep your awareness from attaching to surface images. Remember, truth is not found in what you see with your eyes, but in what you recognize with your mind. An illness is not your essence. A failure is not your definition. A dead end is not your destiny. But if you continue to speak of them as if they have supreme power over your life, they will remain. On the other hand, when you dare to stand before what frightens you and declare that divine life is still active, light is still present, order is still working, then that is true prayer. One who practices spiritual prayer does not ask why something has happened, but asks how light can move through them in this very moment. They do not spend time exposing the wound. They use that energy to affirm what stands opposite the problem, because they know if you look at darkness and speak to it in fear, it will grow. But if you face it with calm and say, "The light is stronger," then the darkness must retreat. Talking to God about the problem may bring a feeling of being heard, but it does not shift your vibration. Meanwhile, speaking to the problem with truth changes your entire inner structure, and that inner change brings external change. When you say, "I am grateful that light is present even if I cannot yet see it," you move from victim to co-creator. There is a vast difference between pleading and declaring. Pleading comes from the sense of not having. Declaring comes from the awareness of having already been given. And the law only responds to awareness. The one who pleads says, "Please help me get through this." The one who declares says, "I am upheld by divine strength in every circumstance." One sends out a signal of lack. The other emits the frequency of fullness. And the law does not choose based on pity. It aligns based on resonance. Pause and reflect on the prayers you usually speak. How much of them are centered around what is wrong? How much is spent detailing what you want to escape from? And how much is devoted to affirming what you wish to see? The greatest shift in your life does not come from a miracle, but from the moment you stop talking about the problem as if it is the final truth, and begin speaking of truth as if it is your only reality. When Jesus healed, he did not ask how long someone had been sick. He did not analyze the symptoms. He simply said, "Rise, go, your faith has made you well." He did not need to know how many years they had suffered, because he did not let ego overshadow the truth. He simply declared the higher order. And when that word was spoken from an undivided awareness, the invisible became visible. Prayer is not a negotiation with God about what needs to be fixed. It is the act of remembering that divine life does not need to be persuaded. It only needs to be acknowledged. And that acknowledgement is not found in talking endlessly about pain, but in speaking with certainty about wholeness. You do not come to prayer to explain to God why you are worthy. You come to clarify for yourself that you are already connected to what never changes. From the moment you stop seeing the problem as an invincible force and start declaring the truth as an unshakable foundation, prayer has been fulfilled. No need for many words, no need for emotional climax, just clarity. And that clarity is the beginning of all transformation. Words are tools of creation, not tools of comfort. Speech is not meant to merely make you feel better for a moment. It was not born to soothe or calm a chaotic mind. Words are instruments of creation, the initial building blocks in the process of shaping reality. Every sentence you speak carries a distinct energetic shape, a unique vibration, and each of those vibrations plants a seed in the invisible realm. If you were aware of what you were sowing each day through your words, you would likely be far more mindful of every word you let escape, because words do not simply vanish after being spoken. They enter the structure of your energy field, reshape emotions, guide behavior, and ultimately mold your life. No word is harmless. Whether it is something said in passing, a casual joke, or even a silent, self-deprecating comment, every word leaves an imprint. God does not reward pretty phrases or punish ugly ones. But the law of radiation is always at work. If you emit words of denial, scarcity, fear, or limitation, you are giving orders to reality to create according to those signals. On the other hand, when you speak with clarity, with awareness, with faith, those words begin to reorganize the space around you to match that higher frequency. A person who is unaware of the power of speech often uses words as a form of comfort. They speak to self-soothe, to appear positive, to quiet fear temporarily. But words that lack vibrational depth are merely hollow shells. They cannot shape reality. They have no impact on the law. They drift like thin smoke, leaving behind only a fleeting sensation. If you say, "I will make it through," but your heart is full of doubt and inner contradiction, then that statement lacks the energy needed to link with the stream of creation. In contrast, when you understand that every word you speak is an instruction to the universe, you no longer use speech to pacify. You use it to build. Like an architect, you do not draw blueprints to feel better. You draw to construct. And because you intend to build, you measure, you calculate, you choose carefully. Your words are no different. They are the spiritual blueprint of the house that is your life. There is no randomness in the inner world. A negative phrase, repeated often, does not stay in your head. It becomes habit, forms a network of vibrations, and over time shapes your character. A person who constantly says, "I am not good enough," will begin to live as if it were true, act from insecurity, attract circumstances that confirm that belief, and they may think life has betrayed them, when in fact, they were the ones who planted the first seed through speech. Jesus never used speech as a means of comfort. He did not speak to please. He spoke to impact. He declared. He commanded. Every word was a spiritual act. When he said, "Rise, walk, your eyes are opened," it was not a hope. It was a directive from a consciousness undivided. And that word, spoken from a place without doubt, compelled reality to conform to its vibration. Words hold power when they emerge from a state of unity. When your mind, your emotions, and your faith are all aligned in one direction, your words become principle. They need not be repeated many times. They do not require witnesses. They only need to be clear. And a clear word can reach into the deepest layer of the law, vibrating through the entire system of mind and matter around you. You do not need to shout for your words to be effective. You only need to fully understand that when you speak, you are creating an energy field, and that energy does not disappear. It enters the stream of creation and begins its work. Therefore, begin to speak consciously. Do not speak just to fill space. Do not joke about things you do not wish to happen. Do not plant even the smallest seeds of denial. Every word is a seed. Not all seeds sprout immediately, but eventually, each finds the soil it needs to grow. And then you will forget you ever said it. But reality does not forget. It is still responding. And when you see outcomes appear and wonder where they came from, return and listen again to what you once said. You will see the connection. The same applies to spoken prayer. It is not effectiveness through repetition. It is the strength of a steady mind, a unified emotion, and the awareness that your word is becoming a creative force the moment it is spoken. A single sincere sentence, spoken once, from a mind free of doubt, can alter the entire direction of a life. Words are tools to design reality. Use them as a creator. And when you begin to speak as if you are building, reality will respond as if you are the one guiding it. And you are. You have always been. You only need to remember. And begin to speak as if what you say is true. Because in the realm of the law, it has always been true, simply waiting for your confirmation. See it clearly. Your words must be accompanied by an image. Every word must carry a picture, or else it is merely sound drifting by. You may speak beautiful phrases, make positive affirmations, or offer heartfelt prayers, but if your mind does not carry a vivid image aligned with those words, then you have only completed half the work. Words give the command, but images provide direction. And the law does not respond to hollow speech. It requires words that are paired with a clear enough concept to generate directed energy. You cannot command an intelligent force to move if you do not tell it what you want by feeling it as a living, breathing reality. Imagination is not fantasy. It is a higher mental function where you consciously build an inner space to receive what the eyes have not yet seen. Every time you close your eyes and vividly visualize what you are moving toward, you are broadcasting a living frequency. And that frequency has more pulling power than any desperate plea. The universe is not moved by wishes, but by inner images repeated with consistent emotion. If you say you are healthy, but in your mind you only see yourself depleted and weak, then the words carry no power. But if you imagine your body flowing with light, recovery, and the joy of being alive, that image can alter your cells even before medicine does. To see clearly is not just to observe the surface. It is to feel every layer of what you are reaching for. You do not simply see the house. You feel the peace inside the room, the morning light pouring through the window, your footsteps on wooden floors, the subtle scent in the air you've curated. You do not merely say, "I want to live in freedom." You envision the feeling of lightness in your chest, the steadiness when making choices, the joy of not needing anyone or anything to feel complete. Vivid visualization is the step from concept to inner reality. And only when something becomes real within you does it have the power to appear outside. You are not trying to force reality to obey your will. You are preparing the inside so that what you want can enter without resistance. Anything you cannot yet visualize clearly, you cannot yet receive. Not because it is not coming, but because there is no space for it to land. Proper imagination is the highest form of spiritual training. It demands focus, discipline, and refinement. You must repeat the image daily, not with frantic desire, but with the quiet knowing that it is already natural. Clear visualization is the union of intuition and faith. You no longer ask when it will arrive, because in your mind, it already has. Those who understand the law do not live by events. They live by the image they carry within, and that image leads. Each morning you wake. You can choose to react to external conditions or to go inward and live from the picture you wish to magnify. A person may be surrounded by scarcity, yet hold an image of abundance inside. Then every action, decision, and word they speak reflects that inner reality, and gradually, the outer world must adjust in that direction. No need for many words if the image is strong. No need to strain affirmations if the picture in your heart is steady. When you can walk as if it's already happening, smile as if it's already unfolding, give thanks as if you've already received, then your body, your speech, your eyes, and your energy all align. And when everything aligns, the universe has no choice but to respond in harmony. This is the power of voice within, not just a voice you hear, but a space you return to. Not a sound spoken outward for someone else to hear, but a place you return to in order to remember that you carry within yourself the power to shape all things, with your words, with your vision, with the state of being you choose. Each time you are silent and step into that inner space where you see clearly what you desire, you are truly praying. No words, but full presence. No pleading, only affirmation. Imagination does not need to be a stage for grand visions. Sometimes, it is simply the image of you walking with faith, speaking gently to others, completing the day with clarity. But if that image is repeated and absorbed deeply, it will reshape the person you are. And from there, form is no longer something you must struggle to achieve. It becomes something that arises naturally from the space you have prepared. There is no rush, only clarity and repetition. In silence, in love, in gratitude. Timely silence is a powerful form of prayer. There are times when the most sacred thing you can do is not to plead, not to affirm, but to remain silent. Not because you do not know what to say, but because you have entered a state where words are no longer necessary. This is not passive silence. It is a conscious choice, a deliberate decision not to react, not to resist, not to try and control. In that silence, you are not avoiding reality. You are standing within it like a pillar, unwavering, unshaken, unafraid. It is precisely in the moments when your mind wants to rush out to explain, to defend, to prove something, that choosing to remain silent becomes a high spiritual act. You do not need to speak to adjust the world, because you know that inner order will realign the outer world. Silence is not surrender. It is a retreat into a firmer ground where you no longer respond from fear, but answer with presence. There is a mysterious strength in not responding to attacks with words. When you do not try to argue right or wrong, when you refuse to get pulled into the energy of conflict, you not only preserve your own peace, you send a very clear signal: I no longer live at the level of emotional chaos. And that stillness can shake an entire situation because it offers nothing to push against. When you can sit inside the storm without needing to shout, explain, or be understood, that is when you are operating the law in silence. You say nothing, yet you are issuing a command. A higher order is at work here. And from that energetic level, everything beneath it begins to dissolve. Prayer is not always spoken. Many times it is when you quietly face what hurts, but no longer repeat the story. You do not replay the wound. You do not reignite the memory of failure. You simply sit, breathe, and refuse to be broken open by the wave of emotion. In that moment, you have done something more powerful than 1,000 positive affirmations. You have declined to be swept away. Timely silence is the art of inner stability. You no longer need encouragement. You no longer need to be understood. You no longer seek defense. You have crossed into another realm where you choose to listen to the law instead of the noise of circumstances. One who has experienced the strength of silence will never again panic when the world becomes unpredictable, because they know that sometimes the most essential action is not to do more, not to say more, but to withdraw energy, quiet the winds within, and let the law continue its work. Just like an unfinished painting, you cannot rush to cover the canvas out of fear of emptiness. The waiting within silence is the space where intuition rises, where the picture becomes clearer. And when words do come forth after such silence, they carry 100 times the power. Jesus often retreated into the wilderness to be alone, not because he had nothing to say, but because he understood that silence is the place of restoration, the place where vision expands, the space where he remembered his full authority. And when he returned from that silence, every word healed, every act carried sacred weight. You are no different. Every time something tempts you to react immediately, try pausing instead. Silence is not about swallowing anger. It is about not allowing anger to become action. Silence is not defeat. It is reclaiming your power. In that inner realm where you sit alone and choose not to react, you are recalibrating your frequency. You are protecting your state of consciousness. You are holding prayer in its most original form-grounded presence. This is the power of voice within. Not just a voice you hear, but a space you return to. And sometimes, in that space, you do not need to say anything. You only need to listen. Listen to yourself. Listen to the silence that is healing every deep layer. Strength is not in speaking well, but in knowing when not to speak. Deep connection is not in repeating endless prayers, but in walking into life's storm with an undisturbed mind. Timely silence is the most powerful declaration you can make in the face of any situation. And when you do it consciously, you will see true prayer is not something you say aloud, but a state you live in. A state where, without words, everything begins to shift. Because truth does not need to shout. It only needs to be held. And silence is the ground where truth reveals itself most completely. Forgiveness is clearing the channel of receiving. You may pray every day, speak beautiful words, visualize what you desire with all your faith. But if there is still something within you that remains unforgiven, it is like a stream blocked by a stone in its center. Forgiveness is not a lofty moral gesture, but a vital necessity if you truly want the law to operate fully in your life. No one can hold tightly to anger and expect to receive freedom, peace, or joy. Energy can only flow when the receiving channel is clean, and unforgiveness is the spiritual debris that blocks everything you long for. Forgiveness is not about calling wrong right. It does not mean erasing memory or denying pain. Forgiveness happens when you stop carrying that pain as part of your identity, when you no longer use the wound as a reason to limit yourself, when you can look back on the past without being bound by old emotions. Only then are you truly free. Forgiveness is not because the other deserves it, but because you no longer wish to pay for the past with your mental health and your present power. Each time you hold on to resentment, You not only carry a spiritual wound, but you close off a part of your ability to receive. There can be no wholeness in prayer if you remain divided from another. The law does not respond to prayers that come from a mind clouded by the shadow of the past. Only when you step out of the victim role, release the burden of what others have done, does your word become one that carries light. You cannot look toward the light and stare at the wound at the same time. You must choose. Forgiveness is the act of turning from the past and facing the source of life. It is when you refuse to let others continue to control your mood, your energy, your future, by severing the invisible cord that keeps you tied to them through your anger. You may never hear an apology. The truth may never be spoken. But you can still choose to leave the swamp of unresolved emotion with one simple, quiet, but powerful sentence: I forgive. And when you truly forgive, you do not need to declare it to anyone. The universe will know. Your energy field shifts. The current of consciousness flows again. Your prayers resound with a newfound clarity. What once took great effort to attain suddenly begins to arrive with ease. Not because you did more, but because you removed the stone that blocked the stream. Forgiveness does not arise from forced effort. It comes from understanding. When you realize that those who hurt you were acting from fear, from limited awareness, from their own inner fractures, you no longer see yourself as the personal target of pain. You see the repetition of unconscious patterns. And when you stop personalizing the pain, you begin the journey into true forgiveness. Not because you are weak, but because you are strong enough to release what no longer serves your growth. Forgiveness is clearing the space of reception. It is wiping the window of the mind so that light can enter unfiltered by the stains of old resentment. When you no longer use pain as an excuse to delay transformation, when you no longer blame the past to avoid fully living the present, you become someone capable of receiving every good thing that has been waiting for you. The law does not withhold blessings, but if the vessel is still murky, the pure cannot be poured in. Perhaps you've wondered why your prayers, your efforts, your affirmations have yet to yield results. Look within and ask, is there something I have not forgiven? Is there something I still think about that tightens my chest? If so, that is the space that needs cleansing, not to please anyone, but to free yourself from the internal loop that keeps you trapped in old reactions, old choices, and old outcomes. Forgiveness does not change the past, but it completely transforms how you live in the present, and from there, it opens a future no longer tainted by what is past. You become a clear river where light can reflect, and your prayer, at that point, no longer needs many words, because you have become a state that is ready to receive. No striving, no proving, just openness, and a willingness to let the good enter through the door you have finally cleared. That is the deepest meaning of forgiveness, and that is the true beginning of the miracle. Faith is not a positive feeling. It is unshakable certainty. Many people confuse faith with pleasant emotions. They think that when they feel excited, optimistic, and everything looks bright, that must be faith. But true faith does not depend on feelings. It does not rise and fall with moods. It does not rely on external encouragement, and it is not lost on a gloomy day. Faith is what you know with certainty, even when you feel nothing at all. Faith is a state of stability. It is the knowing that what you are reaching for is real, is coming, and will come, no matter what the present appears to say otherwise. You can feel hopeless and still hold faith. You can face a harsh reality and still choose not to waver. That is when faith truly begins to work. It does not need outside light because it is the light from within. It does not wait for immediate evidence to confirm what you already know in your heart, because faith does not wait to see before it believes. It believes first, and that belief makes the way for what is seen. Faith is not like a flame that flares up when the wind is favorable. It is like a glowing ember, holding heat even through the darkest night. You may repeat positive affirmations again and again, But if your heart still doubts, still measures, still sets deadlines and conditions, that is not yet faith. That is hope. Hope is expecting good while still leaving a door open for failure. Faith closes all other doors, not out of stubbornness, but because it is seen clearly from within. No wavering, no hesitation, no negotiation with fear. Faith does not argue with spiritual truth. It accepts and then acts upon it as if it had already happened. One who has faith does not need to ask the universe over and over whether what they desire will come. They do not check the results every day to verify their belief. They do not need proof, and precisely because they do not need it, they become the perfect vessel to receive it. The universe does not respond to hesitation. It responds to certainty. When you finish praying and still feel anxious, you have just canceled what you affirmed. But when you pray and then rise as if it is already done, you create a directional force that cannot be reversed. Faith does not make everything easier immediately, but it makes you immovable in the face of circumstances. You act like someone who knows, not like someone testing their luck. You move forward without needing to see the whole path, because you do not need outer evidence to believe. You already have the evidence inside. Faith does not need emotional highs. It needs consistency. Every time your mind wants to doubt, you do not need to fight it. Just return to the core. What do I know? What have I decided? What do I choose to hold? And hold your ground. Those with faith do not boast. They do not always talk about what they believe. They act on it. They work as if it will arrive, because to them, it already has. No noise, no need for validation, no need to soothe the emotions. Just steady like stone, quiet like a river, strong like deep roots. That is the spirit of faith. Faith does not come from theory. It comes from personal experience. From the moment you chose to believe and remained firm, and then saw the miracle unfold. From the times when you had nothing to cling to but a faint inner conviction, and still you did not retreat. And over time, you saw that it was faith that carried you through. Faith is trained like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. The more you hold it, the sharper it becomes. The more you walk through adversity with faith, the more you realize you do not need a perfect world to live powerfully. You only need strong roots within. You do not have to feel positive all the time. You only need not abandon what you know is true. When emotions fluctuate, you can still choose to keep your mind anchored in what has already been affirmed. No need to convince yourself. Just stay. No need to check progress. Just continue. No need to speed it up. Just hold steady. Everything you need is being arranged, not because you control everything, but because you trust and live from that point. And when you live from faith, nothing can take your peace away. No matter what is happening, you know the truth is arriving. No matter what anyone says, you do not absorb the energy of doubt. Even when results are not yet visible, you are not moved from your ground. Because you know faith is not a fleeting positive feeling. It is unshakable certainty. And from that certainty, everything begins to take form. Not too soon, not too late, but right on time. You do not need to control the outcome. You only need to manage your state. Every effort you've ever made to control results, to make something happen your way, stems from a fundamental misunderstanding. You were not born to manipulate the flow of the universe. You do not need to do that. You only need to stand firm in the right state. When your inner state is clear, steady, and consistent, the outcome will reflect that. Results do not come because you force them. They come because you have become aligned with what you desire, not because you demanded it, but because you matched it. Everything in life reflects inner state, not the other way around. When you feel out of control, it's often not because the situation is too complex, but because you've drifted away from your inner center. You are trying to hold on to a result that hasn't arrived, or resisting something that is unfolding. That behavior drains your energy, blurs your clarity, and blocks your ability to hear what is true. But when you release the need to control and instead focus fully on maintaining your inner state, you begin to feel the return. A return that needs no explanation. You do not need to know what will happen next week. You only need to adjust yourself today. You do not need others to change to match your vision. You only need to live from inner wholeness and let what is aligned find its way to you. The miracle is, when you stop trying to control the result, you do not become powerless. You become more lucid. You stop wasting energy on what is beyond your domain and redirect all your strength toward mastering your thoughts, emotions, and behavior. You stop chasing outcomes and become the one who sets the original frequency. This is not surrender. It is wisdom. It is when you understand that the result is merely the expression, but the root is the state you maintain. You do not need to beg for what you want. You only need to become someone worthy of receiving it. And to do that, you must turn inward, not to find fault, but to recalibrate, to reestablish emotional grounding, to become still and ask yourself, what state am I broadcasting? Is this frequency truly aligned with what I'm calling in? This is the power of voice within. Not just a voice you hear, but a space you return to. No one else can maintain that state for you. No situation is strong enough to change you if you do not shift within. And nothing can block what is meant to unfold when you hold the right frequency. When you control your state, you are no longer swept away by temporary reactions. You do not need results to appear instantly in order to feel safe. You do not need immediate proof to affirm what you believe. You only need to keep yourself rooted in the center, not drifting from truth, not dissolving into emotion, not blaming the external. You only need to hold a state of clarity, calm, gentleness, but unwavering strength. Maintaining your state does not mean you do nothing. On the contrary, you act with greater clarity and precision because you are no longer confused between what is real and what is illusion. You no longer react out of fear, but act from a deeper vision. You no longer force things to happen your way, but let the law operate, and you walk beside it. And when what you've been calling in finally arrives, you will realize it did not come because you fought for it, but because you were ready. All the prayers you've ever sent have not been lost, but they require a receiver who is in the right state. That is something you can control. You cannot force others to change, but you can choose not to react from old energy. You cannot make a situation unfold exactly as you planned, but you can keep yourself from losing clarity because of it. And when you can hold your state, that is when you truly hold power. You do not need to say much. You do not need to do more. You only need to choose to stand in the level of consciousness where what you desire already exists and stay there each day, without needing to know when results will arrive, without checking the timeline. Just align yourself with the frequency and let everything else be added in the most effortless way. The outcome does not need to be controlled. It only needs to be left alone. And in the meantime, you do your part, not outwardly, but inwardly. Managing your state is the highest form of action, because when you can do that, no one can take your stability away. And that stability is the very place where miracles begin to form. It is not about who is favored, but who aligns with the law. Life does not reward the kindest person, nor uplift the most moral, and certainly does not favor those who have suffered more than others. The law does not look at your history. It does not weigh how much you have endured, how many failures you've had, or how much you have sacrificed. The law functions with perfect objectivity, like gravity. Whoever aligns with principle receives the result. Whoever operates outside the frequency will lose direction, no matter how good their intentions may be. It is not about being loved. It is about being in alignment. You can pray all night, but if your mind is filled with doubt, your emotions steeped in resentment, Your actions riddled with contradiction, the law cannot operate in your favor. Not because you are not good enough, but because you are broadcasting the wrong signal. There are no exceptions. There are no shortcuts. No one can override the law on your behalf. You do not need pity. You need awakening. You do not need more luck. You need to understand how consciousness works and live in harmony with it. If you see others succeeding more easily than you, do not fall into envy or self-pity. Ask instead, what principle are they operating correctly? If someone appears quiet but draws good things into their life, do not assume they are just lucky. They are living on the right frequency. They are not resisting reality. They are not begging from a place of lack. They know how to choose the right thoughts, maintain the right feelings, and act from wholeness, not from the wound. The result is not a favor. It is a natural outcome. The law does not care how you feel. It responds to what you emit. The law does not react to tears. It responds to frequency. When you emit fear, you draw more reasons to be afraid. When you radiate genuine peace, you become a magnet for all things aligned with that state. This is nothing new, but it becomes alive the moment you stop seeing yourself as a victim of the world and start seeing yourself as a co-creator working with the law. It is not those who pray the most beautifully who receive the most. It is those who understand the unity between their words, their inner images, and their emotional state. You do not need to live a perfect life, but you must live in alignment with principle. You can stumble, but you must choose to rise with clarity. You do not need to please anyone, but you must live in integrity with what you believe is true. That is when you are living within the law, and the law will never abandon you. Many people think they need someone's approval before they deserve a better life. But the law does not require credentials or permission. It only requires you to tune your inner frequency to match what you seek. Not by daydreaming with your eyes closed, but by acting each day from a place of certainty. Not to win favor from the universe, but to become a vessel worthy of receiving. And make no mistake, doing more does not always yield better results. The law does not care how busy you are. It simply reflects the level of energy you consistently maintain. You can speak positive words all day, but if your heart is filled with fear, doubt, or anger, your words carry no power. You can take massive action, but if it comes from a sense of lack, everything you create will still reflect that absence. The law is not fooled. The law is faithful only to truth. And the truth is, you do not need to be chosen to enter a good life. You only need to choose to live by its principles. You do not need to be invited, because the door is always open. The only question is whether you will walk through. And walking through means leaving behind old patterns. It means no more blaming, no more using pain as an excuse. It means beginning to live as if the good is already here. Not to dream, but to align. Not to prove, but to embody. Not to earn reward, but to participate in creating the result from within. And if you still do not see what you hope for, do not lose patience. Look again, where are you off frequency? Ask yourself, am I speaking the right words? Am I thinking images aligned with what I desire? Am I holding emotions that truly match it? If not, adjust. No blaming, no panic. You are not being punished. You are learning how to operate correctly, and that is the greatest privilege, because once you truly learn, no one can take it from you. Do not pray for special treatment. Live in alignment with the law, because the law shows no favoritism, but it will absolutely support those who know how to live in sync with it. And in that moment, everything you once thought was a miracle will simply be the natural result of precision. No luck needed, no exceptions required. Just understanding and application. You do not need to be chosen. You only need to choose correctly. Those who pray well do not pray more. They live in that state. Prayer is not a string of repeated words. It is not a never-ending list of requests, nor is it a tool to soothe your worries before returning to the same old, conflicted, and chaotic life. A person who prays well is not the one who speaks most, but the one who lives with consistency. They do not need to always sit down, close their eyes, and utter poetic words. They do not wait for a moment to connect. They live in that connection in every second, every choice, every breath. Have you noticed how many times you've prayed, only to live afterward as if nothing had ever happened? You tell the universe that you trust, yet you take each step as if everything depends on fear. You ask for guidance, but do not let your mind grow still long enough to listen. You repeat affirmations, but inside you still feel anxious, uncertain, and fragmented. So, the real question is, what state are you living in? Let me ask you one thing and answer it truthfully from within. When you pray, what are you trying to change the situation outside or the state inside? And when your prayer is done, do you walk away as someone who knows they've been heard? Or as someone still waiting for something to happen so they can feel at peace? Pause for a few seconds and be honest with yourself. Let that question gently knock on the door of your mind, because it is there that you will see whether you are truly connected or merely repeating a ritual. The one who prays well is someone whose every step is a confirmation. They do not need to shout. They do not need to repeat. Every action, every small choice shows that they have believed, they have known, they have aligned with something greater. They live as if what they asked for is already present. They do not need emotional highs. They do not need the perfect moment. For them, life itself is a prayer in motion. Prayer is not about form. It is about state, the state you choose to maintain when no one is watching. The state you live in when you no longer think about doing the right thing, but are simply being yourself in the right way. When you stop separating life and spirit, you'll see that the ones who pray best are not the ones who speak most, but those who live in harmony. You do not need to appear devout. You need to be clear. You do not need to repeat a ritual if afterward you return to old patterns, old thoughts, and old habits. You do not need to build an altar out there when inside you still neglect the temple. Remember, your inner state is the living altar, and the person you are each day is the most powerful prayer the universe is listening to. So instead of asking how to pray correctly, ask yourself, what state am I living in? Is it a state of gratitude or of lack? A state of certainty or of doubt disguised as humility? A state of one who has received? Or of one still negotiating with life? And if you realize that you've drifted from that state, don't blame yourself. Just return. Through stillness, through a conscious breath, through choosing again a new thought, a new feeling, and a centered action. You do not need to strain to do something holy. You only need to stop living in contradiction to what you have prayed for. Live as if you are in continuous dialogue with what you believe is already true. You cannot deceive the law, but you also do not need to complicate it. You only need to ensure that your inner state reflects what you wish to see on the outside. And then every prayer you offer no longer needs to be spoken because it becomes a life lived in full presence. If you are still listening, I thank you not just for being here, but because you are becoming part of something larger. A shift in which each of us stops treating prayer as a form and instead lives as a steady stream of connection. You are not just hearing these words, you are living with them. And that alone is enough to create profound change. So walk as if you are praying. Be still, as if you've already been heard. And act as if what you have called in is approaching you not from outside, but from within. Because in truth, it has always been there, waiting for you to live in alignment with it. Do not say, "Give it to me." Say, "I have received it." Every prayer that begins with, "Please give me," is rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding. Because if you believe what you need does not yet exist, then you have denied the very principle of creation. You are speaking as an outsider, as if you must persuade some distant force to have mercy and grant you what you lack. But the essence of prayer is not to ask, it is to affirm, not to beg, but to connect, and not to wait for something to happen, but to live as if it already has. You do not need to say, "Give me peace." Peace is not outside of you. It does not need to be sent. It is waiting for you to clear the inner chaos so it can be felt. You do not need to say, "Give me healing." Healing is already embedded in the original design of your mind. What you need is to stop hurting yourself with repeated thoughts, unresolved memories, and behaviors that no longer serve. You do not need to say, "Give me my dream," because it is not far. It is simply at another frequency, and your task is to align yourself with that frequency. You cannot attract what you do not believe you are worthy of, and you cannot hold on to what you continue to live as if you do not have. If you keep repeating, "Please give me," you are sending out the message that you are still lacking, and the universe will only reflect that back to you. You are not being denied. You are being responded to not in words, but in frequency. If you broadcast scarcity, you cannot receive abundance. If you feel separate from what you desire, you will always remain on the outside of it. Look closely at those who are truly strong in consciousness. They do not say much. They do not plead. They live as though everything they need is already walking with them. They move with certainty, not because they have proof, but because they have awareness. They do not ask, "Is it coming?" They ask, "Who must I become for it to be revealed?" That is the transformation of one who has stepped out of a begging mindset and into a receiving mindset. And only when you stop pleading like a spiritual beggar will you begin to receive as a co-creator. "I have received" is not a phrase to comfort yourself. It is an affirmation from one who chooses to trust the principle, not the circumstance. When you say that and truly live it, you begin to adjust your behavior, your choices, your emotions, and your energy to align with what you desire. You stop looking for outer signs to confirm your faith, because your grounded presence becomes the sign. You no longer need someone to assure you of what is coming. You become the one who brings it forth. Remember, results do not begin with desire. They begin with state. And there is no state more powerful than that of one who knows they have already received. They no longer act to gain approval. They act to express. They no longer live to fill a void. They live from the fullness already within. They no longer need to persuade anyone, because they are the living evidence of what they believe. Every word they speak, every action they take, affirms to life, "I have received." And that is where everything begins to change. The world out there is only a reflection. It does not decide what you can have. It only listens to what you are being on the inside. If you continue to say, "Give it to me," you are delaying the outcome. If you choose to say, "I have received," and live accordingly, you are opening the door for what you have called in to enter. But remember, words are not enough. You must become it. You cannot say, "I have received love," and then continue to live in emotional closure and doubt. You cannot say, "I have received opportunity," and then resist every change. You cannot say, "I have received the light," and still live in the shadows of your own making. "I have received" is a commitment. It is not easy, but it is the only step if you truly want transformation. It demands that you leave behind your old identity, the identity of one who is always lacking, always waiting, always hoping but never certain. It requires you to step out of the mindset of blame, comparison, and hesitation. It calls you to act as if what you seek has already arrived, even when your eyes have not yet seen it. And that is true spiritual maturity. No longer dependent on evidence, no longer reliant on outer validation. Only clarity from within remains. Do not say, "Give it to me" anymore. Begin each day in gratitude, knowing that it has already come, and then live as one who protects, nurtures, and multiplies what they have received. No more begging, only action born from alignment. And then you will understand, miracles have never come from pity. They have always come from resonance. If you have not seen the result, do not adjust the prayer. Adjust yourself. When results have not appeared, most people rush back to their prayers, editing the words, repeating new phrases, hoping that if they say it differently, say it louder, say it more often, something might change. They revise the words, the grammar, even the volume, but they do not revise themselves. And that is the critical mistake. Results do not respond to your words. They respond to the person you are being. You do not attract according to the content of your prayer, but according to the frequency you emit each day. So, if you have not seen the result, do not adjust your words, adjust your inner state. The question is not how many times you have prayed, but who you have become after each prayer. Do you still worry, control, resist, judge, and live in contradiction? If so, then no words can bring about what you desire. Prayer is not magic. It is the beginning of an inner reconstruction. If the prayer is the seed, then you are the soil, and no one plants a seed in dry sand expecting an abundant harvest. Instead of asking why you have not seen results, ask this: have I truly lived in alignment with what I have prayed for? Am I holding the state of trust? Am I treating myself as someone who has already received? Or am I still doubting, testing the universe, counting the days to see if the outcome arrives on schedule? If your mind is still checking, you have not believed. If you are still depending on results to feel at peace, you are not aligned. And if you still need everything to happen your way, you have not surrendered to the law, you are only negotiating with it. True prayer is not an isolated act in a few quiet minutes. It is the way you live afterward. It is whether you can hold your composure in a turbulent day, whether you can refuse to fall into old fears when familiar situations return, whether you can reject old reactions and choose to act from a higher level of consciousness. That is when your prayer begins to operate, not through grammar, but through the living frequency you sustain. This is the power of voice within, not just a voice you hear, but a space you return to. Not something you reach for in weakness, but a place you return to in every decision. Not a phrase to remember, but a presence to embody. When you truly adjust yourself, you no longer need to shout at the universe. You become quiet, steady, and compelling. And in that space, everything you need begins to find its way to you, not because you spoke beautifully, but because you became a place worthy of receiving. Maybe you have been praying for a long time. Maybe you are tired of not seeing change. But instead of returning to old actions with a new kind of desperation, stop. Look directly at yourself. Not to blame, but to see clearly where adjustment is needed. Maybe you are still afraid. Maybe you are not being honest with yourself. Maybe you are placing all your hope on an outcome, instead of resting in deep acceptance of the process. And maybe you are demanding immediate results from a self that has not yet truly changed. If you are brave enough to adjust yourself, you will realize that results do not come from doing more, but from becoming clearer. You do not need to repeat the prayer, only to align with it. You do not need to emphasize the words, only to live in such a way that every action, every choice, becomes an extension of what you wish to see. And then, results are no longer something you wait for. They are something you live with. The one who prays effectively does not ask, "Did I say it right?" They ask, "Have I become right?" Because they understand the world does not hear what they say. It feels the presence they carry. And that presence is the product of someone who dares to look inward, to correct every distortion, to cleanse every resistance, and then live as though what they have prayed for is already engraved in their mind, with no need to repeat it. If today you have not yet seen results, do not rush to change the prayer. Do not rush to complain. Turn inward. Live closer to the truth. Act as if everything you believe to be right has already been entrusted to you. Not with urgency, but with consistency. And at some point, you will see what you once called a result is really just the reflection of a self that has been rightly adjusted. No more need for proof, no more waiting. Only a new you remains clear, grounded, and worthy. When you no longer need to pray, that is the moment you have become the prayer. There comes a point in every journey when you realize there is nothing more you need to say. Not because you are weary, nor because you have given up, but because you have been transformed. You no longer bow your head in supplication, no longer pour out your heart, no longer feel the urge to declare anything, because your very presence is the complete affirmation. You are no longer separate from what you believe. You have become it. When you no longer need to pray, it means you are the living, breathing, unfolding prayer. You walk with peace that has no cause, because it does not arise from circumstances, but from an inner state you have established. You act no longer from lack, but from wholeness. You no longer need to affirm anything, because you are the evidence. Your presence alone is enough to inspire, to uplift, to shift the frequency of an entire room without uttering a single word, not because of who you are, but because you are living truthfully, clearly, and consistently with what you once called forth. Prayer is the beginning, the first beat that awakens a sleeping heart, but it is not the destination. Like learning to play a piece of music, you must first know the notes. But there will come a time when you no longer read the sheet. You are the music. You no longer try to play it right. You play it naturally, deeply, soulfully, and never miss a note. Prayer is the same. As long as you still need words, you are learning. But when you no longer need to speak, you have become part of the divine essence you once sought. You no longer need to persuade the universe, because you no longer need it to do anything for you. You have begun to live as a co-creator. You walk with the law, not to use it, but to express it. And the world cannot help but respond to someone like that. Everything you need begins to arrive, not through force, not through pleading, but because you have become the proper place for it to appear. You do not attract results because you pray beautifully, but because you live authentically. When you have become the prayer, you are no longer torn between thought and feeling, no longer conflicted between what you say and what you believe. You no longer need to say, "I believe," because every action, every choice, every ounce of your patience becomes a living testimony of faith. You live as though what you believe is already evident, and you need no one to affirm it, because you are the affirmation. You become the one who sets the rhythm for the space you enter. You are the one who does not just speak of peace, but holds it in storms. Not just speak of light, but carry it. Not just speak of gratitude, but infuse it into every glance, every gesture, every quiet act of kindness, unseen by others. And that is the greatest form of maturity. Not loud, not performative, not in need of an audience. If you have listened this far, if you have reflected, if you are beginning to sense the subtle movements within yourself, I offer you my deepest thanks. Thank you for allowing these words to become part of your journey. Thank you for not just reading, but living. Thank you for choosing the path of truth, of transformation, of growth. And now, I do not wish for you to merely nod in agreement. I want you to act. Act as if you are the living prayer this world needs. Act as if each step you take writes a sacred declaration that you are ready. No more conditions, no more guarantees. Just live with clarity. Live with truth. Live fully. Begin with the small things. A conscious word. A decisive choice. A single act that breaks away from the old patterns. And do these things with gratitude, with faith, with full presence. Because you do not need to pray to become worthy. You only need to live in a way that never betrays what you know to be true. We have walked a long road together through each part of this story. And if you are still here, it is proof that you did not come merely to listen, but to change. I believe you will continue far beyond this moment. And at every step ahead, remember, you are never alone. This is the power of voice within, not just a voice you hear, but a space you return to. A space where you can always come back when the world grows noisy. When you need to remind yourself that you are not merely surviving, you are becoming. I will see you on the next journey. Keep your inner flame bright, keep your mind still, and keep your soul reminded. You do not need to pray another word when you have become the most beautiful prayer life has ever heard.